So, the translations are out for My Hero Academia Manga Chapter 341, and there's just one question that I want to ask, and is pretty much the focus of this entire video. Can Twice be revived? We'll see if he can, but first, right after this. Hey guys, how's it going? It is your boy, Manga Man Drew, and I'm here to do my manga discussion for My Hero Academia Manga Chapter 341. And like I said in the intro, I really want to focus this video on Twice, and particularly whether or not he will be involved in the story more, as well as go over the obvious differences between the official and unofficial translations. But the focus of this video is going to be on whether or not Twice can actually be revived and what would need to be done for that to actually happen. So, before we get into the actual discussion, I'd like to ask you, if you haven't done so, to subscribe to my YouTube channel. I cover My Hero Academia content. I do discussions, I do spoilers, I cover the reviews. So, if that's something that you're interested in, subscribe to my YouTube channel. And without the way, let's get right into it. For starters, there isn't that much difference between the official and unofficial translations when it comes to major effects on the story as a whole. The two small ones that I noticed between the official and unofficial translations involve some dialogue that Dabi says. When it comes to Toga, in the unofficial translation, he seems to be more caring of Toga and it's more blatant, but in the official translation, he's being more dismissive on the idea that he burned down the house because he cares about her, but just implying the fact that he did it, as well as seeing how they've interacted and grown throughout the series, it seems as if he does have a little bit more care for Toga. The only major difference is that it's more blatant that he cares in the unofficial translations, but it's more ambiguous in the official. Another slight difference when it comes to translations between the official and unofficial translation just comes from the dialogue of Skeptic. And it's just a small little thing that sort of kind of changes how he interacts with Spinner. In the unofficial translation, he brings up the idea about your kind harbors a deep hatred for like the hero society and heroes, while in the official translation, he just talks about how plenty of heteromorphs hold deep grudges against heroes. And the main difference just comes from the wording and how in the unofficial translation, Skeptic seems to be a little bit more racist or a little bit more discriminatory against Spinner. While in the official translation, it seems to be less of the case, but the fact that he is still using the term heteromorph could still have some intentions of being a little bit discriminatory, but it's a lot less blatant and less racist and still falls in the line of discriminatory, just to a lesser extent. So yeah, that's pretty much all of the differences between the official and unofficial translations. I'll also point out some differences that I really couldn't see, mainly due to the fact that there was a difference in the scan quality this week. So the images that I really couldn't see clearly, but I saw them a lot clearer in the official translation, involves a scene where we get to see Shigaraki and how he's in the cave. In the official translation, we could see that big glob dark area that we saw in the scans and the fan translations are actually like fingers that are coming up, and they actually withdraw into Shigaraki as we see his hand and how it's trying to grow the fingers back. So that's a little bit more clarity on that scene, showing that his regeneration is still extremely strong and how he still has some control over it, but he's trying to regenerate his lost limbs. And another thing that I really didn't notice is how many villains were actually in that final double page spread. In the more fan translations, we saw the Sludge villain, we saw one of the villains that was a part of the Paranormal Liberation Front, but we couldn't really see any of the other villains because it was very dark. But now that we've seen them in the official translation, the official release, yeah, there's a lot more villains and it seems to be a lot more heteromorphs, and that's something that I can talk about in a different video. But now let's talk about the main crux of this video. Will Twice return in the story of My Hero Academia? That is the question that I am posing to you, as well as the question that was sort of kind of imposed or posed to us with the reveal that Toga has Twice's blood. It was revealed to us that when Dabi was picked up by Gigantomachia, that he was able to store some blood in a vial and he was able to give it to Toga, and that blood directly came from Twice. And in this chapter, it is brought up with the fact that because of how Toga's quirk works, that if she consumes the blood of someone that she is very close to or someone that she loves, she'll be able to transform into them and use their quirk. So the idea is, can Twice be revived if Toga is able to use his quirk? And from what I've seen and what I've talked about with other people, it is very possible. And here's how most likely something like that can occur. We know how Toga's quirk works. If she consumes blood, she's able to transform into someone that she really cares about. We saw during Twice's fall and his death that we fully learned that Toga truly does care for Twice as a person. And because of that, that means that if she can transform into Twice, in theory, she could be able to use his quirk. And we do know for a fact that when she does consume the person's blood, she's able to transform into what the person was at the moment that she took the blood. And that is very important because we have to remember that Twice's quirk only really truly works to the best of its ability if he truly understands what he's trying to duplicate or create. The reason why he couldn't recreate the quirk erasing bullets is because he had really no idea what was inside of it and not how it was actually made, so he couldn't recreate it properly. But he was able to recreate other characters, including himself, because he had a good vision of who they are, as well as the fact that he took their measurements so that he can imagine them in his head and recreate them in an instant. So with that in mind, and the confirmation that Toga is able to transform into that person, even copying their height, it is very possible that with her blood, she is able to consume it, transform into Twice, measure Twice's body at that current moment, and then once she has that image, or once she has those measurements, she is able to use Twice's quirk while being in Twice's image and recreate him, bringing him back to life in an instant or in a sense. And it's very likely that she can do this, but the issue is she would have to do it fairly quickly. Mainly because when it comes to her transforming into the person that she cares about and consuming their blood, she must have a significant amount of that person's blood to sustain that transformation for an extended amount of time. For instance, for her to have stayed Kami for as long as she did, she had to, for the most part, have Kami restrained for an extended amount of time and constantly get blood from her. Now, she was unable to use Kami's quirk, but she was still able to transform into her. And also adding to that, and we know that when it comes to Toga's quirk of transform, if she's able to consume around a cup of blood, she will be able to sustain that person's body for approximately a day. So with that small vial that she has, she could probably hold Twice's appearance for, let's just assume, 10 minutes. That could be enough time for her to get the measurements of Twice in that form, and after she's gotten those measurements, make a replica or a copy of Twice using Twice's quirk. Because we know for a fact that Twice can make a copy of himself, and that his copies can also make copies of himself. And that the copies that are made are going to be based off the last time that person was measured. So in theory, because she'll have the measurements and because she'll be able to visualize Twice in her mind, she'll be able to use his quirk and recreate Twice. And be able to recreate Twice at the moment in which he sort of kind of died. And then that's going to lead into a totally different discussion. And we later learn that the clones themselves, you can still get blood from them. So in theory, if she's able to use Twice's blood to resurrect Twice, if she's able to get blood from that new Twice and store it up later, if that Twice were to die, she could also, in theory, bring Twice back again based off that clone's blood. Unless for some apparent reason that clone's blood disappears at the moment that the clone disappears, but we've actually never seen that be the case. And we've seen literally Toga get a blood transfusion from herself, so it's very unlikely that that will be the case. So it is very likely that Twice can come back, but that's gonna lead to a whole bunch of problems. For starters, the heroes are going to be in even more of a disadvantageous position, because not only would they have to deal with another Twice running around, but if another Twice is running around, they have to deal with multiple potential villains running around as well. And their goal is to separate the villains from one another, but with a Twice clone, that's going to be pretty much impossible because they will not know if the person that they are separating is actually that person or a clone. Now, on the flip side, because it's a clone, any clones that it makes will be significantly weaker than the original. But still, if they're able to withstand like enough damage for a short amount of time, then that shouldn't matter. They could serve as distractions and lead to potentially some heroes dying and putting the heroes in a more disadvantageous position. And this doesn't even touch the idea that Twice could potentially replicate All For One and Shigaraki, who are extremely durable, especially with Shigaraki, but most likely even with that durability, they could most likely still disappear, because even if you were to clone Shigaraki, it would still be a clone, and if it takes enough damage, it will still disappear, and it probably won't have, or it probably won't be affected by the regen quirk, because it's all about damage and not actual injury. So defeating a clone of Shigaraki would not be that bad. It would just be the fact that there is a clone of Shigaraki with all of his new powers and abilities, and that would be a problem for the heroes. Even if they could take him out, they would still have to contend with an overpowered Shigaraki. And even with that in mind, we still have to address the mental issues that's going to come from this Twice clone, because you'll then realize that if Toga were to bring Twice back, Twice's worst fear will be realized. Being a clone, but yet still being the original, because he would be the new original Twice derived from a clone because the original died. And that mental anguish of not knowing if he's the real one or not will just come back in spades and most likely make him crazier, which could in turn actually make him a liability for the villains, because his mental stability and mental state may be so out of whack that he may indirectly turn on the villains because of the chaos of him being the real Twice, but also being a clone. So there's going to potentially be a lot of psychological issues that will come from the idea of resurrecting Twice, like how there are ethical and moral quandaries of the ability of being able to bring someone back to life, let alone just cloning them outright. We saw the morality of what happened when Twice cloned himself. Now, let's take that to another extreme and having him be a clone and have him question himself if he's original. Basically, what I'm saying is Twice can be brought back, but there is no guarantee that it will be the right choice for either the villains or the heroes. So yeah, that's all I really have to say about this topic on whether or not Twice can be revived. I think that he can, but it will not happen without having some type of ramifications or psychological effect on either both Twice and Toga. So let me ask you, do you think that it's actually possible? Do you think about the proof and the evidence that I said is actually feasible? Leave your thoughts down in the comments down below. I'd like to hear your thoughts on whether or not Twice could actually be brought back and what effects it could have on the story that I didn't really think of. And leave a like on this video if you like this type of content, as well as subscribe to my YouTube channel and hit that notification bell to be notified for whenever I upload more content like this. Do all that cool jazz, and hopefully I'll be able to catch you in my next video. Goodbye!